Alright, I recently posted that I just passed my NCLEX RN and I received lots of messages asking for advice, so that is what this video is for. I'm going to tell you guys what I did to prepare for the NCLEX. I can't say that it was easy. I can't say that I felt fully prepared, but I did pass on my first try in 85 questions, and so I'm gonna let you know what I did. So I paid for NCLEX bootcamp for the 30-day program, course, whatever, and I didn't use it for all of the 30 days though. So I graduated nursing school on August 21st. I took about like a week and a half off, I would say, and then maybe towards the end of August, I started going through some of the practice questions. I started doing like 85 question tests a day and just kind of seeing where I stood. So at this point, I would say it was like September 1st. I still didn't have my test date, so I still didn't have like a set schedule because I didn't know how many weeks I would have until I had to take the test. So I was still doing like 85-ish questions a day, all in one sitting, just trying to see like the stamina I had for the questions and how I would do at the end. I didn't do terrible. I was getting above average on everything, but I was still in like that 60-70% range. But all the averages on boot camp are already in the 60s, so I wasn't far off, and it kept telling me I was doing good, so I just assumed I was doing good. I did also listen to Mark K's lectures during this time, so I listened to one pretty much every day. 1 through 11 I listened to, and I downloaded his like blue book and took notes on that. It did help, but after taking the NCLEX, I do feel like his lectures are maybe a little outdated, at least from my personal test experience. I didn't get a lot of information that pertained to what he goes into depth on in his videos. I do think it's a good like basis for straight knowledge, like if you're lacking in cardiovascular or endocrine or something like that, it's good to like refresh. And he does give good study tips throughout the whole thing too, but again, I don't know if not listening to him would have made a difference for me. So I'd say the main thing for me was NCLEX bootcamp. I will put up my scores on the screen here. I did all 4 readiness exams and I got very high on all of them. I think they were easier than the NCLEX, but I do think they helped me learn how to answer questions and learn how to prioritize between 2 answers and how to pick the better option, because when I took the NCLEX, that was my biggest struggle, was being torn between 2 options and having to make an educated, not guess, but use all of the knowledge I had to figure out which one was more likely to be correct. The case studies on NCLEX bootcamp were my favorite part of it because they do mimic what the NCLEX actually looks like, and it really teaches you how to get comfortable with case studies, because I know they're not always the easiest. Sometimes they can be intimidating because of the 6 parts, but they definitely did help me, and so if I could recommend bootcamp for anything, it would be for the case studies. And then for my average overall, I got a 70% overall average for all questions, and I almost finished the entire test bank. So it's like 1,900 questions, and I finished like 1,800 questions, I would say. I just got to a point where it was the day before the test, and I wasn't gonna push myself to finish the last like 90 questions or whatever I had. And then another piece of advice I would give is to just try to stay calm, because that is one thing that I did not do well at. I was so nervous. I was so anxious. I went to the exam just like I didn't feel good. My stomach was upset. It was not a great day, and I feel like I should have worked harder to try to calm myself down. Maybe it would have made it a little bit easier and a better process for me. I also would advise to stay off of TikTok or any social media for the 48 hours after the test, because I was just killing myself for the 48 hours, convincing myself that I failed, that I didn't do good, because I was seeing so many different things on TikTok of people failing and what their experiences were, but everyone's is different. I felt like my test got a little bit easier towards the end, which they say that if it gets easier, that means you might not be doing that well. But I feel like my easier questions were the last like 5 to 10 questions, and I still passed an 85. So that's just my personal experience, but because I was on TikTok chronically after taking the test, I was literally convinced that I failed and on the verge of a mental breakdown like every second. But other than that, I would just trust your gut. If you're using NCLEX Bootcamp, continue with it. If you're using Archer or UWorld, I would just say continue with it. I don't necessarily think one is better than another. I just went with Bootcamp because I saw good reviews about it. It was the cheaper option and I liked the setup of it. I think it's more simple. The rationales really made sense to me and I felt like I did gain a lot of knowledge from going through that test bank. So that is really all the advice I have. Again, I only used Marquet and NCLEX Bootcamp. I did not use a single other source other than everything that I learned during nursing school. But other than that, that's all I used. I studied loosely for I'd say maybe 2.5 weeks and like strictly like 6 to 8 hours a day for like 6-ish days once I scheduled the date. So that is really all the advice I have. If you have any other questions, you can message me or just comment and I can give as much advice as I possibly can. But again, I did feel confused and conflicted during the NCLEX. I didn't feel prepared during it, but I think deep down I was. It was more my anxious thoughts taking over. So just try to stay calm, trust your gut, and move on from the question and just try not to think about it after you press submit.